Hello, welcome to session number 2 of Ciclo de Conversas de Design in Multimédia 2021 at the University of Coimbra. My name is Ana Boavida. I'm a graphic designer and a professor at the bachelor and master degrees in design and multimedia at this university. Before moving on, I feel the need to address the fact that this session is being held in English, despite both chair and speakers being native. Welcome to session number 2 of Ciclo de Conversas de Design Multimédia. Okay, sorry. Since we are conducting this session online, the use of English is intended to make these sessions as inclusive as possible. Believe me, I would be far more comfortable with a session in Portuguese, as my weak English clearly demonstrates. I hope, however, that my English is good enough for all of you to understand me, and please bear with me if I do need to read from my notes. On a short initial note, I would like to thank the team that made this year's Ciclo de Conversas possible, namely professors and researchers Pedro Martins, Nuno Coelho, João Coceiro, João Cunha, Mariana Ceissa, Sérgio Rebelo, and Tiago Martins, and also the students Fábio Gouveia and Laura Paes for the vibrant design they developed for this year's event. Before introducing today's guests, I remind everyone that is watching that you can place your questions in the comments, and we will try to answer them after the presentations. Well, I am very happy to chair a session with two such prolific actors of the design and editorial world, Miguel Gouveia and Elaine Ramos. Our first speaker today will be Miguel Gouveia, a Portuguese publisher, one of the two founders of the publishing house Bruá, specialized in books for children. Before being a publisher, Miguel was a teacher of Portuguese and English for 10 years, having taught at Voz do Operário in Lisbon and at St. Julian's School in Carcavelos. In addition to teaching, he maintained a regular activity as a musician, participating in multiple projects and works on the organization of several national and international guitar festivals. After years of studying the life and work of the Portuguese singer José Afonso, Miguel becomes part of the board of Associação José Afonso, for which he writes the book Escritas do Maio and creates the exhibition Desta Canção Que Apeteço, that reunites for the first time José Afonso's complete discography. In 2010, he finished his master's degree in book and literature for children and youth at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. He then gave up teaching to dedicate himself full-time to publishing, translation, music, oral narration, and reading aloud. Bruá has since published over 50 books. Some are originals, which were later translated and published in over 12 countries. The rest are first Portuguese editions of international acclaimed children's book authors. Bruno Munari, Walter Benjamin, Milton Glaser, Violeta Lopes, André da Loba, and Catarina Sobral are just a few examples of authors published by Bruá. Miguel and his partner also run a graphic design studio and 2 bookstores in Coimbra and in Figueira da Foz. They are wonderful independent shops where we can lose ourselves in a carefully curated selection of books, postcards, art prints, and card games, among other paper artifacts. Miguel, welcome and thank you for your presence here. The screen is yours.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to everyone at Ciclo de Conversas for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here, a pleasure and an honor for us, such a small publishing house. And like Anna said, so Bruá is a publishing house and also a design studio from Figueira da Foz in Portugal. And we've been running for 13 years, more or less now, and we haven't reached 50 books yet. And we started in 2008 while I was still a teacher and Claudia My wife was, and she still is, a graphic designer. And we realized that the scenario wasn't that diverse in terms of picture books in Portugal. And from my own experience as a teacher, I had to buy a lot of books from foreign publishers because they weren't getting to Portugal as fast as we wished for. So we thought of, instead of complaining all the time of the situation, we started to think about opening a publishing house, and we did that. We did that in 2008, so it was the worst timing possible, because that was the beginning of the financial crisis. But any date to open a publishing house is it's not a good timing because it's always a very difficult adventure, and you just have to open the publishing house, and you have to go on and do what you have to do. So we started in 2008, and we started with a book that we wanted to start with, a book that had some kind of impact, because it's not easy to be a publishing house of one book. And our plan was to publish 3 to 4 books a year, and 13 years have gone, and we haven't reached 50, like I said before. So we have a really slow pace of publishing. We're just like that snail on the side of the road, looking at the fast cars passing by. And we just want to keep like that. We want to keep that way, and work every single book with time and patience. And there's no need to speed up. And our philosophy has been always this: to have time, to spend time with the books, and not to go into those fast trains that it's sometimes difficult to get out, and you have to publish new books after new books. So it's not something that we're not that ambitious. So we really want to keep small and slow. And so the first book, I'm just going to show you some of the books. You can see what we've been doing on our website. It's brua.pt. Everything we've done is there. Some of the books are not available anymore because, well, some of them are quite expensive now to republish. At the time we had some money, now we don't. Times are more difficult now. And so some books are now sold out, and we don't have a date to republish them. But the first book I wanted to share with you is it's that first book we wanted to get some impact, because then in terms of distribution, you don't have, if you don't have a good title, you can't get into bookshops, at least the big ones. So we decided on this one, The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. It's a well-known book around the world. It's been translated in more than 30 countries. And we decided this one would be the one to start with, the one that would cause some impact. And so we did that, and we were for some months the publishing house of one book. And that's how we presented ourselves, as the publishing house of one book. And some people closed their doors, like big chain bookshops. But once we sent the book and they read them, the orders started to come in, because no one gets indifferent towards this book. You might like it, you might hate it, but you won't be indifferent to this story. And the second book was this one called Eu Espero. I believe in English someone translated it into I Can't Wait. And being the picture book our main focus, although we are a graphic design studio, we work mainly with picture books. And this is a great example of what a picture book should be. So the relation between text, graphic design, and the object itself, the format, is a wonderful example of what a picture book can be, what we can achieve in this kind of work. And the third one, I'm just going to tell you about these the books we have on the podium, the first, the second, the third. because it's kind of a cliche, but it's the books that, it's not kind, it's actually a cliche, but they exist for some reason. We believe that these books found us instead of finding them, because when we connect those three books, if you know the books, there's a strong line of connection between them. And this is by the German illustrator Wolf Elbruck, which is an amazing illustrator, which now is quite, I don't know, maybe he's in his 70s, 80s, I don't know. And what happens with these great artists that are not in social media right now and can't publish their work, they're kind of forgotten. And Wolf Hellbrook is an amazing artist, a source of inspiration for many, many illustrators, but he's not out there anymore. And his work is kind of, it's not forget, but is not so alive as it was like 10 years ago. And this is also an amazing book. And these three books, basically, they have a questioning of life, and they're connected because of that. So our first steps were an exercise of buying books that were already published in other countries, in other languages, and we basically imported them to Portugal, to Portuguese language. But then, because we live in such a small country, so hence this small market, we had to start thinking differently. And we started to think about creating our own books, our own original books, so we could start to invert the process and start to sell our books to foreign publishers. So we started to do that. And we came up with several books that, and the third phase of this, so we started buying books from other publishers. The second phase in Brua was the creation of original work. And there's a third stage where we started to rescue books that were already forgotten from the market. And I'll show you those in a minute. So we started to create some original books, like this one of Daniel Harms, a Russian author that we really, really love. It's one of our favorite authors. And then we did a kind of an object called Smoked Herring by André de Loba, which is this fish that you can see here. And this was on one of our first projects as an original book. And so we continued to do that. And because of our relation to graphic design, we also wanted to have some graphic designers work in our catalog. And so we went to some of our big references, like Bruno Munari, with this book, which was made in the late 50s and is still a very experimental and amazing book, In the Dark Night, because this book actually goes into the narration with the paper itself. So Bruno Munari signifies the night with this Fedrigoni black paper. Then he signifies the dawn by using this paper, and then to signify the day uses a third paper with lots of cutouts also. And it's an amazing book. And then we have this lovely, tasty detail in the end of what seems to be stars shining. And in the end, he hides his biography in this small yellow paper. If you don't know Bruno Munari, I recommend you to just find everything that he has done, because is one true genius of the 20th century. And so we bought this book from the Italian publisher Corraini, which, of course, our path is made of references in terms of authors, illustrators, and writers, in terms of publishing houses. that we already knew before starting. And Corraini in Italy is one of our references because they're publishing everything by Bruno Munari. Another reference that we had was Ivan Shermayev. And from Ivan Shermayev, we did 3 books. We recovered this one from 1960. And then we recovered this one from 1961. Ivan Shermayev, as you of course might know, was a very prolific graphic designer, a North American graphic designer, and he made several books for children. And we then made a 3rd book with him, an original book that he had at the time we wrote him to start working in the recovering of these books. And so we have a 3rd book that you can check out on our website. So Bruno Munari, Ivan Shermayev, we found out a Czech graphic designer called Dobroslav Fall. This one not as known as the other ones, but he did some amazing books for kids. This one is called This or That, and he uses this plastic sheet to make this game. And this happens in other illustrations along the book, like this one, for example. On the cover, you can do that also. And finally, the last graphic designer we worked with, it still seems like a dream. And these 2 nobodies from Figueira da Foz in Portugal called Milton Glaser in New York one day to see if he was interested in republishing a book that he did with his wife in the 60s. And this was the book, If Apples Had Teeth. We found a really nice copy in a secondhand bookshop in the United Kingdom. We bought it for a nice sum of money. And then Milton Glaser said yes. Again, this is something that just happens with really nice and big people like Milton Glaser. And from that one, we did the Portuguese edition, Se as Maçãs Tivessem Dentes. And then we sold it to 5 languages, including back to English. And so this basically meant a full recovery of these illustrations that Milton Glaser did for the text that he and his wife made back then. So this is our connection between the publishing and the graphic design, because as Roberto Calasso, the Italian publisher, said once, your catalog needs to tell a story. Every book is like a chapter of a story. And we really feel really close to that concept of narrating a story throughout your catalog. And so every book needs to be think really, really hard of how are you going to do it, what comes after what book. And so that's why we keep publishing 3-4 books max every year. Another book that we're really proud of publishing in Portugal was this one, Crocodile Tears by André François, a French painter and illustrator. This is, if you study the picture book store history, this is of course one of the must books that you have to check out, because again, this was made in 1956 and is still quite a very contemporary object. It's basically a father trying to explain his kid what's the meaning of crocodile tears. So he comes up with a very surreal story, and the book is about that. It's a very wonderful book. It was published in France in a photography by a photography publisher called Robert Delpire, which still exists. And because he was a good friend of André François, he started publishing his books and also other famous books. But it was quite an interesting publishing house, because they mainly publish photography and they have this mini catalog of children's books. Other books that we have recovered, lately we recovered this one called Misery It's a book from the 1960s, a book that had, this is our own edition of the book. It opens like this. And because it's called Misery, we wanted to make a really simple work with the book. And the original edition was a softcover book, and we did this one. So this happens because as publishers, we think that we need to be a little bit like archaeologists nowadays, because the production of books is so accelerated that many books are just forgotten under this pile of paper that comes out every day. And the authors are already dead, they've passed away, and they're not here to defend and to republish their work that's still valid and still fresh as in the 50s, 20s, 30s. There's plenty of books that still deserve to be on in bookshops. So we decide to have this double head, like Janice, always looking at the present and the future, but always looking at the past, because you need to know what has been done before, so you at least don't try to repeat yourself. And like someone said, we're basically all writing the same book. So it's good to know to do your homework before you start doing something like this. And because of that, we come across really, as gold diggers, we really find some gold nuggets from time to time. And these books we've shown you are those gold nuggets that still can be found. We've recovered books from, for example, this one was made in 1979 from Ed Emberley. In North America, loads of people know Ed Emberley because he had these little books that taught you how to draw. And this book was done in 1979. It's a book that works with transparencies, so that you have little riddles. And then, now I don't have too much light here, but you can see the image gets complete once it gets some light behind it. And originally it's called The Amazing Look-Through Book, and we contacted Ed Emberley and rescued this book also. This book was also great success in North America back in the 70s. Nothing Ever Happens in My Block by Ellen Raskin. It's also an amazing book of an amazing example of what a picture book should be, because the connection between the text and the illustrations is overwhelming, because basically you just have this character here, he's complaining that nothing happens in his block, but behind him there are 1,000 little narratives going on from page to page. They start to grow and develop, and by the end it just doesn't realize how many things are happening in his neighborhood. And in the end, he says, is when he grows up he'll move because his neighborhood is so dull. And it's a very contemporary critic to our society. Kids and adults have everything nowadays. Everything is dull, everything is done, and you don't realize the magnificent story that your neighbor has to tell, for example. These are also 2 books we did, and we rescue them. This is a Swedish author called Kjell Ringi. Kjell Ringi was a painter, a Swedish painter. He did these books on in a travel he did to the United States, and he was invited by HarperCollins to make some picture books. He accepted it, and then he came up with these lovely books. This one, The Stranger, it's very contemporary also, because it's about racism, about this stranger that appears to these people, and everyone is quite overwhelmed with the presence of this stranger. They don't know what to do. Also with Portuguese books, this one, Compêndio, from a Portuguese illustrator called Tossin. This was also made in 1959 and was already forgotten, and we recovered it. And quite recently we did the one for cats, the Gatalo, which makes a pair. Then when we realized that we had a nice number of original works, we started to try and sell them to other publishers. And because Portugal is such a small market, we really needed that oxygen, and we still are using that oxygen to survive. And that oxygen, by oxygen, I mean the books we sell to other languages. And we've been doing okay in that sense. The books have been published in several countries, now more than 12. And I'm going to show you some of those books. So we've been publishing in Korea, for example. The Korean market is quite active, and they're looking always for nice books. We've published in Dutch, for example. I'll show you this book in a while. In Russian, this one is called Matilde in Portuguese, by a Portuguese writer and Italian illustrator. We've published in German also. In French, this one Elaine will know it because it was published in Kozak in Brazil. In China, we've also published our books in China. That book I've just shown you with a different cover for the Italian edition. Again, Korean and Polish, we've also published, and now we're going to go and be published in Greek and German for the first time. So our books have been traveling a little bit around the world, which is a really nice sign of if things are well done, because that notion that I told you about a little while ago of your catalog being a novel, every book being a chapter of a story you're telling, it's really important, because foreign publishers will look at your catalog and they'll look for some coherence, and that's what we try to achieve. And that's why we are so slow in publishing, because we think about a lot what will come next, what makes sense after these books we've published. And although we're great fans of nonsense and of the absurd, and your catalog can also tell an absurd story, but there needs to be some coherence in that absurdity, in that surrealism. So foreign publishers will look at that catalog and they will come back to it, because they know you tell a nice story. But if you start to zigzag between your proposals, that might not be good for you. But of course, that's up to every publisher to think how we will build his catalog. This book, I've just shown you the Dutch. So books will start in many different ways. I've shown you the original projects, the books we've recovered from the 60s and the 70s, and other books that we found out that were not that nicely illustrated, but the text was amazing. Like this Supposing is a book by a Scottish writer, a poet called Alistair Reid. And Alistair Reid did some of the most subversive texts there are for kids. And this is probably one of the most subversive texts for kids. And because we didn't like the original illustrations, but the text was amazing, so we come up with a third edition, now with an illustrator that we consider to be one of the most amazing illustrators out there. She's called Jo Yoon. She's Korean, living in the United States, and she made an amazing job for this amazing text by Alistair Reid, because the the big problem in publishing for children and for everyone for that matter is that it's really difficult. It's really, really, really difficult to find a good text. There are many amazing illustrators out there, but the problem for us publishers is to find that golden nugget that is an amazing text. And of course, an amazing text for me will be something else for another publisher. That's a long discussion. But so that's why we keep on digging. We keep on digging because we know that there are books from the past that contain amazing, amazing texts. And that's why we keep on digging, because nowadays, as a small publishing house, we don't get the big ones also. It's hard for us to propose to big names of writing and illustration, because we are a small market and we do 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 books tops. That's what we do in Portugal, at least in our publishing house. And that's not very attractive for a big name in illustration. We can't pay that much. We are as a micro publishing house, so we have to go back in time, and we found that kind of strategy to rescue books from the past that are still fresh and intense as in the day they were published. And it's a really amazing feeling to go back, I don't know, 1910, 1920, and find an author that no one remembers anymore, and you found it and you give it a second life, and then you see kids taking the same pleasure out of it as the kids back in the 60s or 70s. So it's quite an experience to do the whole process. It's quite a painful process because recovering books means that you don't have the original artwork. So you have to digitize every single illustration. You have to recover them digitally, and you have to make lots of printing tests to see if everything is okay, because it's a big risk to publish these books. And of course, there was a kind of fashion back 10 years ago, let's say, of recovering books. I believe we had a small role in that, because we came up with big names like Milton Glaser being published in Figueira da Foz in Portugal was still a miracle. And then we sell that book to China, to France, to the United States. And of course, that then when everyone talks about the English edition, no one talks about the first publisher that recovered it. They only talk about the American edition, but that's fine. We're not looking for any medals. But there was this wave of recovering, and many books were recovered, and fantastically so. They've been recovered by great publishing houses, and it's also a really nice way to show to new illustrators, new writers, to stress that thing that I told some time ago, that you really need to do your homework. You need to be surprised by a writer or an illustrator or a graphic designer that worked back in the last century and did amazing work. And you need to know those stepping stones, to situate yourself among these references, and to find your voice. Because what we see a lot nowadays in illustration is a copy of a copy of a copy. You can call it influence, of course, but in a time where we're basically surrounded by images in social media and in other places. It's really hard to find someone with their own voice, with something new, at least at least a little bit new. And so the market, like I said, in Portugal is not that easy. the publishing business is not easy in any part of the world. It's a really hard adventure, but it's really, if you can only survive if you really like it. No one looking for earning lots of money will thrive in publishing. They will not survive. They will not get along for a long time, because it's basically hurdles after hurdles on your path, and you need to be really resilient and try to thrive. So basically, we continue to do everything, but as we started, so the two of us. There's no one else in Brua. And besides publishing, we now have two bookshops, and Claudia goes to one, I go to the other. And this is really nice. If you are a publisher, your vision, your panoramic vision of things isn't that panoramic, because you send a book to bookshops and there you don't know what really happens to that book. Why are people buying that book and not the one on the side of that one? And having the bookshops is really nice for us to have this complete panoramic view, and to see why are people buying these books, or why are they buying the other ones. And frankly, there's no formula, because if there was one, but there isn't. And it's quite amazing to see how people are buying books. The person that goes into a bookshop, I will say, I don't know, 70-80% doesn't have a clue of what he's going or she's going to buy. And so the bookshop keeper is an essential figure in this process. But as you know, there aren't that many good bookshop keepers, because it's also really hard to be a bookshop keeper nowadays, because there are so many new books coming out every single day. You cannot keep up with everything that comes out. So a real bookshop keeper, if he can, he will filter. That's what we do in our bookshops. We have a filter, and everything that people will see in our bookshops has been filtered the same way we filter books to our catalog. And so the proposals we have in the bookshops, we think, are also, they need to be in accordance to our taste, because we cannot sell a book that we don't like. And so every single object and book that is in our bookshops has been a personal choice, because we love that object, we love that book. And also because in Portugal at this moment, like I suppose everywhere else in the world, there's been a boom of picture books. There's a really nice market right now. Nice market in terms of a diverse offer. Of course, if you squeeze everything that's been published in 1 year, you'll come up, if you're lucky, with really 5-6 really good books that were published during that year. Because the more you know, and if you do this exercise of digging in the past, you can see that these new proposals are just a recycling of things that have been done in the past. And also because publishing for kids, and I'll say publishing for everyone, is still a very conservative market. If you try to do something out of the box, a little bit subversive, it's really you're gonna take a toll on that decision, because people won't buy that little bit more risky book. And so the game is to have some more, I won't say mainstream, because in our catalog we don't have anything that can be called mainstream, but we have to do this kind of dance between more risky options and more commercial options. You need to have your head in the clouds, but your feet on the ground. And we try to do that. Sometimes it's really difficult. And we cannot publish every book that we have in our personal library, because I'll say it in terms of Portugal, there's still no critical mass to absorb the proposals, some of the proposals that we would like to publish. If I tell you that that black book from Bruno Munari that I showed you earlier, we did, I believe we did 2,000 copies, and we did 2,000 copies of that book in 2010. We still have some copies from that first edition. So a country with 10 million people was not, I don't know if it was probably our fault, but a book that is still groundbreaking, something that is amazing, was amazing, still is, and will be for many years to come. We haven't been able to sell 2,000 copies of that book that we made in 2010. So, and there are many books like that that we wish to publish, but we still aren't able to do that. And we try to do that, but we need to be really careful, because one step wrong and we can be out of business. And now with all of these variables that we have, this unknown future that is every day more unknown to us, we really need to reinvent, which is something that we do every single day, reinventing ourselves as publishers. And so basically that's it. I just want to leave you with some references that guide our work and should also help you if you decide to go into the picture book world, which is a fascinating world. And I learned that in my master's degree with great teachers, because it's a world where everyone thinks to know what we're talking about, because we call it children's books. We all read as children children's books, and everyone knows what is a children's book. But when we ask them to define one, and it's a bit difficult. And this relation between adults that are the creators of these contents for children, it's quite a different world, and not everyone is able to. It's a little bit like we've been all students, we've been all in schools, and we all think we can talk about education. And education is constantly moving and changing, and we cannot discuss education because we were someone in a classroom many years ago. The same way with kids' books. We really need to read a lot about how a picture book is done, how people use that picture book, how they use that support to still send these lovely messages. Although people are now a little bit more, authors are a little bit more sophisticated, but they're still very conservative when it comes to writing to kids. And that's because kids' books are chosen by adults. It's an adult market, basically. And the kid will get that book if an adult decides he will get that book. So there's a kind of soft censorship going on. And because of that, I will just want to suggest you this, because there's a ground that we need to know where to step on when we're creating an object for children and for adults, for that matter. So I will just leave you a couple of names that are my references, and I hope that will help you to guide you if you someday want to come into this world. So the first book I want to suggest you is this one, Dear Genius. It's about this woman called Ursula Nordstrom. She was the publisher back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s for HarperCollins. And basically, this is a compendium of all the letters, not all, of course, but many, many letters that she exchanged with writers and illustrators like Tommy Ungerer, Maurice Sendak, Ruth Krauss, and many, many more. This is a really, really lovely book to experience that relation between publisher and authors. in terms of picture books in this case. The other one that I wanted to show you is called, this one is The Hidden Adult by Perry Nodelman. Perry Nodelman is a Canadian author, and his theoretical work about picture books and children's books is something else, and The Hidden Adult is one of his best works. Then in terms of relation between text and illustration, there's Maria Nikolaeva. She's, I don't know if she still is a Cambridge teacher. I believe she's now retired, but her books, any book by Maria Nikolaeva, is really good to understand the relation between this one also, How Picture Books Work, is also a must, together with Caroline Scott. She's also a really nice author. And finally, again, by Perry Nodelman, this one, Words About Pictures, because if you read these books, you will have this eureka moment like I had, that a picture book is not that easy, or it shouldn't be that easy to do. It's not an exercise that you should take on as a fun, well, you should, of course, but there's a lot underground that you need to know to start working in this business. Of course, if you want to write that coherent book that is your catalog, you need to know all of these things and the relationship between text, illustration, and the graphic design, the object itself. That's when a picture book reaches its most its greatest level. And someone said that when you do that connection between these three components, text, illustration, and object, there's almost like a fourth thing that comes up. It's this pleasure that you have, and that the fact that it's no more a kid's book, it's a book for everyone, because it's so well made that there's no limit, there's no frontier, because it's amazingly done. And inside of that, the relation between text and illustration is, again, something else happens when you let the text dance with the illustration. Something else happens. It's that fun when if you're someone that likes dancing, you know the pleasure you get out of it. And that dance can also happen in the picture book, and that's what we must try to again, it's something that we need to try. We cannot always get there, but the text needs to leave some space for the reader to fill in the gaps, but also needs to leave some fill in the gaps for the illustrator. That connection between the text and the illustration is really defining of a picture book. Otherwise, you'll have some redundant exercise of illustrating what's already said in the text. And so this has been the story so far of Bruat. We haven't reached 50 books in 13 years. We have this philosophy of not growing too much and too fast, because it's a little bit scary in terms of a company. We don't have that profile of being ambitious and wanting to grow up and publishing 12, 20 books a year. I think that's crazy. And I hope the future will bring good things, and we'll try and continue, because that's what we've been doing so far, is trying to continue and to provide some proposals that will try to enrich the readers. And so far, the readers have been really nice with us, because we're still here, and that's because of them. And we hope to get their company in the future. And that's all. Everything else is on our website. We prefer that the books do the talk, because they talk a little bit much better than I do. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll await for your questions in the end. Thank you very much.
Okay, Miguel. Thank you. Thank you very much, Miguel. It is always a pleasure to see Brua's work and to hear, to listen from you. I just want you to know that one of that Munaris 2000 copies lives at my house. So I made my part. Okay, and I hope you continue to find more of that gold nuggets so Brua can lives on. Okay, I will just like to remind everyone that is watching us that we will have some time at the end of the next presentation to answer your questions, which you can still submit in the comments section in YouTube. So our second guest is Elaine Ramos. Elaine Ramos is a Brazilian graphic designer. After graduating from the School of Architecture and Urbanism of the University of São Paulo, she became the worldwide envied art director at the legendary publishing house Kozak Naifi. There she remained for 11 years, designing hundreds of books, all of them beautiful objects to be read, seen, and handled. Several of them were recipients of design awards by international renowned institutions, such as Fundação Biblioteca Nacional, Câmara Brasileira do Livro, American Institute of Graphic Arts, and the Art Directors Club. Elaine also coordinated the Portuguese editions of several essential titles in graphic design and typography, many of which we adopt as recommended reading to our students at the University of Coimbra. A History of Graphic Design by Philip Meggs and Halston Purvis, Elements of Typographic Style by Robert Bringhurst, and Thinking with Type by Ellen Lupton are just a few examples. But again, Elaine didn't only design and coordinate the publishing of books, she also researched and edited a massive and super visual book, Linha do Tempo do Design Gráfico no Brasil, Brazilian Graphic Design Timeline, widely acclaimed and recipient of several design awards. Elaine was also a curator of the exhibition Cidade Gráfica in São Paulo. Since 2013, Elaine is a member of the prestigious Alliance Graphique Internationale. After Kozak Naifi's shutdown, Elaine joined with two former colleagues to create a new publishing house named Ubu. On top of that, Elaine directs her own design studio, Studio Gráfico in São Paulo, where book design is still a central activity. Elaine's work has been selected for several exhibitions in cities around the world, including São Paulo, Lisbon, Madrid, Paris, Berlin, and New York City. She has been featured in prestigious international design magazines, catalogs, and books. Elaine has shared her knowledge and experience in numerous occasions at editorial design workshops, postgraduate courses, international lectures, and jury panels at prestigious international design contests. Elaine, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. Please go ahead with your presentation. You must, Elaine, you must turn your mic.
Hello. So Anna, thank you so much for inviting me and thank you for this generous introduction. I'm quite impressive for my own curriculum when you say it. It's very generous. So I must confess that I thought this speech would be yesterday. So I was like, I had everything ready to talk. But when I look at my presentation, I just thought, well, as it is tomorrow and not today, I would like to talk about more recent works. And I just changed it a little. So I just changed it, and I changed it with other projects that are not books. As Anna said, I've been most recognized as a book designer because I worked in this publishing house called Kozak Naifi that that published many of the books that Miguel showed us. So there is a very connection between these publishing houses. And so, as Miguel said, as I just grabbed some books to the beginning of the presentation, but then I can talk about this identity and other projects and then go back to books. Let's see how much time it takes if we can go through everything. I just start a clock here. And then, well, and in the end we can talk, so we can talk more about books. So I'll start sharing my screen. Please let me know if you can see everything. Let me see. Can you see it full screen? Yes. So as Anna said, I can't start in another way than showing this book, because this was very important in my career. This book was published by Kozaki Naif in 2014, I think, and it was a long research. I worked with Chico de Mello in this research for 4 years, and this was like a big immersion. Actually, the idea of publishing this book started when we published the Philip Max History of Design, because I thought it was quite strange of publishing this huge book on the story of design in Brazil and don't having a line about Brazilian design. And the book is called The History of Graphic Design, and it's completely, of course, American and European centered. So after publishing the Philip Max book, during the process of publishing this, of editing that book, translating and editing that book, I started a process with Chico de Mello, who was my professor at the university. And we started the process of making, we wanted to make a folded timeline to go inside the Philip Max book, so that you would be able to point some main things of Brazilian design in relation with the Philip Max book. But we started this fold out, and we started to plan this fold out, and we finished doing this book, which is the same size of Philip Max. So there we have like 1,600 images, and there was nothing published about Brazilian design before. So, and it's not a history of Brazilian design, because to make a history would need much more research, but it's a timeline when we just organize it by decades, all the content, all the things we could find. The process was finding and researching pieces and putting them together and selecting all the time, and to close the selection to this 1,600, and which is a lot, but of course there is many things that stayed out. And I think this book is a starting point for many other research. So the idea was to make this kind of map, and mapping the Brazilian production, and having like many entrance doors to other research. So, and we did together the editing, the selecting, the research, the selecting and the editing. And then I designed the book. So it starts with these details of many graphic pieces, and that has a connection between has a visual connection, but are from very different times. And then we have this, every chapter starts with this opening, and there's a fold, so it makes really easy to navigate throughout the book. And then you have all the connections, and we tried to put together some that many iconic pieces, but also pieces that nobody never saw, and put together many different things because there were some pieces that were like very popular and have very huge print runs, like magazines and so on, and others that were really artist books and really special and experimental pieces. So we tried to make, when you see the book, you have the spirit of that decade with the pieces that circulate, but you have also the cutting edge pieces of that time. And we try to make a balance between these two poles, the experimental and the visual, what was the visual appearance of the period, what everybody saw in the streets. And so we try to make a balance. And so this book was a very long time of my life, and very it was obviously really nice and really fruitful to go through all these pieces. But then here we see the books on design that are published by Ubu. So Kozak Naif stopped in 2016, and I started a new publishing house. Actually, when Kozak finishes, because Kozak was a kind of patronage sponsored project. The owner was a very rich man, so there we could do a lot of experimental things. But when he quit the publishing house, and Florencia, which was the editorial, I was the art director and she was the editorial director, she told me, let's start a publishing house. And I said, are you crazy? Because I know I really love books, and but I think that at that time I thought that having a publishing house was a very, very a nice way of wasting money, because it's really difficult to make it profitable. And we passed through it very intensively in Kozak Naif, because we tried to make it profitable and we couldn't do it. But there are many different reasons that this couldn't happen. And so when Florencia told me, let's open a publishing house, and I said, are you crazy? But she convinced me, and I'm very lucky because she is very good on making money, different from me. So we have many strategies of making it profitable. Also myself and she, we don't have money to invest at all. So it must be profitable. And so we had so what we publish in Ubu is very different than what we publish at Kozak Naife. It has many connections. There are some books that we bought from Kozak Naife to continue publishing. But the idea is much more, it's very different. We make the majority of the books we make are very cheap, are very economical in production terms, in printing and so on. I think the main goal of Ubu is really participating to and contributing to the contemporary debate. So the majority of the books we publish are essays on contemporary issues. We are publishing a lot of things on feminism, on racism, on technology, and Florencia is an anthropologist. So we publish some books that make this connection of contemporary issues in an anthropology way. And we published some design books. Some of them were published by Kozaki, some not. And we plan to publish the Brazilian design timeline in Ubu, but we couldn't do it yet. We must raise money for it. It's impossible it's a lot of money to be invested to make that book. So we must find a sponsor. And the Ubu today has a kind of subscription system. So when we publish one book per month that we publish goes to these subscribers, so it helps a lot. And it was a kind of great thing during the pandemic, because all the bookshops were closed, and then subscription system make us survive during this period that has no perspective of finishing here in Brazil. So it helps a lot, because we have already sold, when we print a book, we have a big part of the print run already sold. So, and these are the books that it's missing in this picture. It's missing the last book we published on design, which is Ruben Pattern, The Politics of Design. So it's a book about the politic that is implicit on making design, the politic whole of making design. And so it's very connected to the other books on Ubu. And we also published this great classic of Marshall McLuhan that you can see there. So, and then, so this is one, we can talk a little more about Ubu then, but I will show you some more recent work. And as Anna said, I split my time in two things. I design Ubu books, but I also have a studio that makes a lot of other kind of projects. Many of them are, all of them are in the cultural field, but not only books. And this is sometimes it's quite difficult to work together in these two projects, because I never have I never can organize my time, and sometimes I'm really overwhelmed, but it's also very interesting for me to experiment other ways of designing, and all the things that we can think about books can be also used on identity. And I think, although sometimes the media is very different, the the thinking that is behind is really, really connected. So, and this is I'll show you 3 identity projects. This is the first one, and this is an identity for a contemporary art exhibition, which was held in MAN, which is the Museum of Modern Art here in São Paulo. And they do like once each 2 years, I think, our exhibition, which is on contemporary. It's very cutting edge, because it's really about the recent production, contemporary artists, young contemporary artists. And this edition that I was invited to work was about the theme of the edition was Sertão. Sertão is a word quite difficult to translate. Probably in Portugal, you know what it means, although it's a really Brazilian word. Sertão is the name of the, let's say, the northeast hinterlands of Brazil. And it's let's say that it's the part of the country that is not facing Europe, and that's much more connected to it's an inner land in Brazil, and it's normally very, the idea of sertão, it's very literary, because probably the 2 main literature books of once written in Brazil are about the sertão. One is Grande Sertão Veredas, and the other is Os Sertões. These are these masterpieces of Brazilian literature. But normally Sertão is very connected with the idea of shortage and poverty, because it's a dry lands, and very sometimes in a certain way much more poor than the coast. But the idea of the curator was about talking about sertão like a different way of looking to this inner Brazil, to this interior of Brazil. And she shows artists that were very out of the mainstream, but that has very intense and very vibrant production, and very out of the box, let's say. And she wanted to talk about sertão not like this great theme on Brazilian culture, but like a way of saying things, a way of enunciating that is not a way that comes from the mainstream, that comes from this connection with Europe and United States and so on. More original, more creative, and the idea of talking about this, let's say, going over the shortage with creative. So these are some artworks that were in the exhibition. And when I was thinking the project, I was thinking that I started designing a kind of this crazy alphabet that was made with pieces of words, pieces um, of signs, let's say, and then this was a way of speaking in a very with a strange language and with a strange alphabet, but the idea was that this strangeness can turns in communication. So it's so particular that you stops to read, and they are bold forms, and so it so I designed a lot of ways of writing the word sertão, many ways. So each time the title appeared, it appeared in a way. It's always different. So this alphabet, the idea of this alphabet was this to make this. It has a connection with some works in the exhibition, and it's an idea of make an alphabet of pieces of things and make it the precarity of this design, because the design is very rough. It looks a little precarious, but making it this precarity, I don't know if this word exists in English, precarity, but making this shortage, this precarity of the design, making it, turning it to communication. So here is the booklet of the exhibition in English and in Portuguese. And this is the installation of the letters. This museum is inside the park and has this huge window. All the museum is it doesn't have walls, just windows outside. And there you can see that the work, this work inside that we can see inside, it's called Fúria Travesti. So the artworks were really, some of them were really aggressive, really contestative. And then this is inside, and all in all the communication, all the text that were inside the exhibition were painted, and not the vinyl was just outside, and inside it were the letters and all the text were painted on the walls. And here you can have a look of the exhibition and the labels. And this is the catalog. So we have this huge sertão written, and then the artworks. This was a very rough paper, but with a silk screening. And the second identity was a very nice project, because it was the identity of a cultural center here in São Paulo that's a very vibrant and very popular and crowded cultural center. It has a huge library and has also many theaters, cinema, and it's a place where every time you go there are many things happening. It's really appropriated by young people, and people go there to study and also go there to dance. It's really nice, because there are many there is a place, a part of this cultural center that is an open space, and every day in our nice past, when we could go out of our houses, it was full of younger people just dancing. They go there to practice street dance, so it's really nice. And this is and it has a very bold architecture, as you can see. It's a mega structure on concrete, a brutalist project, and it has these layers and these crossing ramps. So, and there is also an outside part like this. It's connected to the metro entrance and exit. So it's really urban. People go through it sometimes just to pass. So it's this very alive place. And this is the library. And the identity we proposed to the Centro Cultural São Paulo was very connected to the architecture. So we just started to think about this movement and these strips and this crossing, and we wanted to make an identity that was like that has this idea of flow. So it's not, so the logo we did is not like a signature, but it's this strip that always crosses the visual field. So it's always repeated and always crossed. So the idea, and also all the typography and the images, they are displaced in the visual field. So the idea is really having the idea, the mood of flow, of movement, of a place that there is something happening that is in movement. So the logo is never like a signature in the corner of the paper, but it's always a strip crossing the paper. So you can see some posters there. This is the covers for the guides, and this is the cards and the Instagram. So it's very simple. It's just a simple. The design is very simple, but it's always the thing is the way that it crosses the field and the way the images are always displaced. These are the banners, and then we are again, it's a long time far away from books. Let's go back. So it's the identity for a bookshop. This is a very special bookshop that has just opened last year here in São Paulo downtown. And I was really happy to participate to this project, to be invited to brand this bookshop, because at that time, and like 2 years ago, Brazil went through, and this is connected to our speak about having a publishing house and so on, because in Brazil, all the major bookstores, the chains of bookstores, they break out, they stopped working. So it was like an hecatomb in the editorial market, because they have many bookstores and they close it. They are closing. They close it. They stop paying all the publishers, and many publishers just couldn't go on without these payments. So so the starting a new bookshop, and this kind is bookshop, it's not small, but it's a very curated bookshop, like Miguel said. So everything that's very selected. And so I, when I started thinking about the brand, making the brand, the identity for a bookshop, and I thought, well, the brand of a bookshop probably should not be like, I think that a bookshop doesn't need to, when you go to a bookshop, you don't want to go to a branded place. The identity, it has to appear, it has to be there, it has to be recognized, but in a subtle way, because you are not looking, you don't want to feel like you are in a store. You don't want to feel, you want to feel that you are in a place with content, full of content, and not in a place very branded, especially because these really mega stores in world, they just bankrupt. And so we were really looking for a more special place, and not this kind of branded places. So I researching and thinking about what to do, we stuck in this object that you all know a lot. It's a leporello. It's a paper accordion. And what is interesting at this is an object that is, it can be made of rectangles, like all, because all the modulation, all the landscape in a bookshop are rectangles, right? The book covers. So I think it was interesting about this object because it was made of rectangles. They are folded, and so you have this open and close. It's connected to the scale of the hand and the eyes, like the books, and it stands alone. You see, it's like a self-supporting object. So so the logo for Megafauna, it's a huge name, a very long name, and many letters. We just we started from an object, and then we make it be bidimensionally. And but the thing is that when you can, so it would be a way of writing megafauna that could be folded. So you can fold this logo, and you can have it open when you really read megafauna, but you can have it folded in many ways. This is a prototype. So the interesting thing is that it's a paper object that stands alone, so you can use it in all the scenage inside the bookshop. So you can see there the infantile, that one is the infantile section. So you have there an accordion saying infantile, and so on, megafauna. And we could do also these animations with this idea of folding and unfolding, there are many ways of opening this accordion. And also this idea of, sorry. The third one, well, it's not good. It's quite, no problem. Then you can see another time. So these were the, we made these products, like the t-shirt, and then this is the signage outside. This bookshop is in Copan, so it's really a very iconic building here in São Paulo downtown, and it's a place very crowded and full of people. So it has everything to be a success, but it opened just, it was it would open when started the pandemic. So it opens, closes, and many times. But the idea is making it like a cultural center with many things happening inside the bookstores. So let's come back to books. Well, I'm really short of time, but I think we can look at least at one book. So this is the one you saw there in the first picture. And I always show this project. This is the Kozak Naif edition because these pictures are quite old, but it's published by Ubu nowadays. And this is an example when I'm just talking about books. I always try to grab projects that has different starting points. And in this case of Teoria do Design graphic design theory, the starting point is the structure of the book. It's a book. This book is a collection of texts on design, very classic texts, and classic historical texts on design, and like it has texts from Marinetti, Rodchenko, and many very important characters in the design story. Not only writers, but actually not writers. All the authors are designers or artists. So it's a book. The selection of texts is very connected to the practice of design. So the book has 3 parts, and this part, the organization of the text, the editing of the text is chronological. So you have 3 parts, and each of these parts is from a period. And then, so as the logical of the organization of the editing of the book is chronological, I just thought about making this timeline, which is this timeline where it's a summary of the book. Here you have all the text, the page numbers of the text, but you have also the time span of every author's and the point when the author wrote the text. So here you can see all the convivence, the layers of time because all the texts are very connected, as they are texts from people who people who were producing design, the texts are very connected to their time, to their historical time. For like the Manifesto Futurista, for example, the Futurism Manifest, which is very, it's, you can't read the manifesto, the Futurist Manifesto, like today text, because it's terrible. It's really now it sounds like something really machist, and you won't like it if you read it like an text, a contemporary text. So it was very important to read the text connected to the historical time. So that's why all the structure of the book is this timeline. So it's really you transfer the structure of the books shows that the connection of the timeline is what makes the structure of the book. So, and then you have the three parts, each of them in a spot color. And the books are very simple because they are just printed in one color, and they are stapled in this big timeline, which is folded. So there is a connection with megafauna identity also. So it's folded in 3 times, and then you have this. So this is the detail of the closed book. And then, well, do we have time for one more project maybe? So these books and these two I'm showing are books that the structure of the design thinking is very connected to the structure of the book and to how it's made in the printer and the process that it goes through. So the connection of the structure of the book, like industrial product, and the content. I'm when I think about a book, and I'm always thinking about this. The design is somewhere between these two poles of thinking. That is the graphic production, the industrial processes, and the content, and how to make something different, something that's not that has the structure of the book, but there are some intervention in this structure. So this is a book. The next book I'm showing you is called Ressaca Tropical, which is in English is Tropical Hangover. It has an English edition. And it's a book made from this installation. It's an artist book, and it's the translation of this installation that we see here in the gallery walls to a book. So the installation had this line we see here, which are pages with our selected parts of a found diary. The artist found a diary, and he became very interested about this character, this owner of the diary, who he doesn't know, but he selected some days, some parts of this diary, and that the idea of the installation is talk about day after day of a young person in Recife. This artist is from Recife, and the artist he connected these parts of the diary with images, sometimes historical images, sometimes found images, sometimes his images, and many different images. So it's probably impossible to make it like a book. So we talked about the me and the artist, discussed a lot the idea of translating, and I said him that we should do a book. That's another it's another thing, because if we try to make the installation as a book, it would be always very less than the installation, very worse than the installation. So we make, so we find we we find it's going through. Okay, so it's we started doing this. So we thought about that the book should have different formats, because all the all the installation has this idea of articulating different things. So if we could have different page sizes in the book, it would be an idea of creating this kind of diversity inside the book. So so the book has three sizes, different size of paper. One is this yellow strip where there are the diary pages, and then the other are the other half, and the whole page. But the thing is that we couldn't do it like when you make a book with different page sizes, you normally do it quite manually, because you can't do it by machine. You make it by hand. You print it and you cut it, and then you make you finish it in almost by hand, because you have to put in order the different pages with different sizes. And that was not possible for us, because it would be really expensive. So the only thing I did, so I studied with the printer a way of making it on machine, how to make a book with different page sizes on the normal machine, the normal folding, the machine that folds the signatures, how to make it with different sizes. And actually, when you study the way the machine works, it's not so difficult, because when I displaced the normal fold, this is let's see the scheme of 12-page signature. And when you displace the folds, this is a 12 pages signature that makes pages the same size, right? So, but if you just place the folds and make it in the machine, you can have different page sizes. So this is the displacement we did, and we did in a way that one fold it matches the other, so that we won't have a thicker part and a thinner part. We would have it a balance for the glue, when you are gluing the sewing and gluing the book, we won't have a problem. So we make it in a way that it's displaced, and so we could have the book with different page sizes, and making it in the normal process, machine process. So I think my way of thinking about books is very connected to this thinking about how the book will be produced, and so the thinking about the structure and the way it would be produced. So I think we can stop. I can stop here, so we have time to talk. And you can see that there are many. I made hundreds of books, so I could talk for many hours, but I think we have a very interesting conversation to take place here. So let me stop.
Okay, Elaine, thank you very much, Elaine. What a joy to see your amazing work. So Miguel and Elaine, we will now proceed to the questions and answers session, but we have 2 questions yet for you from the audience at YouTube. So not that much. So before we proceed to the questions and answers session with the questions from the audience, I would like you to suggest a quick warm-up exercise, kind of 2 quick fire questions for each of you, if it's okay. Please try to be brief, okay? I will start with you, Elaine, okay?
Okay.
Elaine, is there anything you have never done in a book design that you would like to do? Because you've done a lot of things in terms of materials and papers and bindings and stuff. And
well, the ideas, they are always like abstract and limited, right? So sometimes I see books that other designers did, and I said, this one I really wanted to have done, but it's not. And of course there are many. I think that designing is always working with restrictions, and in Ubu, for example, we have many cost restrictions. So it's always something. There are many. It's always there is always a lot of dream things like papers and like folds and like things that I never did. But I always think I always think the project very connected to the content, so it's difficult. I don't have an idea that's I would do this, because what can be this if I don't have a content to fix this idea, so to connect with this idea. So I think I don't have many ideas that with no connection with a content. There are maybe some authors that I would like to design a book, maybe some ideas that I see in a book that I would like to have done, and this kind of thing. Yes.
okay. Miguel, as a child, was there a special book that you still remember today? That one you always carry with you, or, you know?
No, actually, I started reading more seriously quite late. There were no books in our house, and so it was just when I was 13 or 14 that I started to play guitar and having music lessons, and the music school was just by the public library. So I went there to wait for my music teacher, and I started to find out about books, and when I was 14 years old, I started to read adult books, let's say. But I don't have that book, or I remember this or that book. It was a series of books that started my relationship with serious reading. Of course, I had connection with books as a kid, but not. And there were other times we spent much more time outside playing. Leaving the house in the morning, getting home to have lunch, get out again, and we played a lot as kids. Me and my brother, we didn't read that much, so I don't have that shelf in my memory of special books or whatever. But now I do. But I'm reading as now the books that I should have read. I don't like to say I should have, because no one should have at any point in life. Things happen the way they happen, but yeah, I don't have one book or that list of 10 books or whatever. I try not to worry about that too.
Okay. Elaine, when you look at an ugly book, what do you see? A visual public enemy, a victim of graphic abuse, or a lost opportunity for you?
I think a lost of opportunity. Mainly if the book is good, the literature is good. I think it's a loss of opportunity, because I think the text, it can be really, it can still be like fantastic and transportate you to a very nice experience, and without a good design. I don't think that the design, the literature, for example, it depends on a good design, not at all. So it's much more loss of opportunity. Maybe you can find a book that you can't read, or you can't understand, or you can't understand the structure, and this would be like much more like an abuse. But if it's like a good literature book, it's just a loss of opportunity, because it's much more for the designer than to the text, I think.
Okay. Miguel, last one for you. I know you collect, or kind of collect, children books. Is there any rare and precious original book that you would like to find, to buy, or even to steal if you could?
I might remember it after I give this answer, but I really don't. I have to go back to the first one and answer with Winnie the Pooh. That is one of my favorite books ever. And yeah, maybe I would like to have the capacity to read in Russian, to go into the Daniil Harms archive in Moscow and read all the work he did for kids and for adults, for that matter. And yes, I would love to do that, to learn Russian, just to read the full work of Daniil Harms and some of his friends.
In the original?
Yes, in the original language, yes.
Okay.
Miguel, did you publish the Susie Lee books?
No, I didn't know. It was another publisher.
They are very connected to the others, but it's about talking about the structure of the book, and they are so nice.
Yes, they are.
And probably you, about this having rare books in your bookshelf, maybe you have Komagata's book.
Yes, we do. We sell them also.
Yeah.
I can share with you, this was one of our latest findings. It's a panorama by Père Castor, a famous French publisher. And there are at least 3 of them. It's the forests, the coast, and the mountain. And these are panoramas that unfold like this. I actually bought them here in Figueira da Foz, Miguel Carvalho. And they go like that.
Wow, it's
this
beautiful.
is actually like this.
It's like a Chinese book, very.
And goes on, goes on, goes on.
Beautiful.
There's actually a German publisher is still going, that they do these kind of I don't know, cylinder books. They do a couple of stories and you have to unfold them, unroll them like that. So there, I don't remember the name, but something like Round Books. I can't remember. But this was the last golden nugget.
Miguel, does that is not only one sheet of paper?
It's one. Yeah, it's one.
Is it only one?
Only one. If I remember well.
It's like scenario paper.
There's 2. Sorry, there's 2.
Oh, okay. You have, yeah, I see the joint. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. There's 2 of them.
Amazing.
Glued to each other.
It's still a huge paper.
Yes.
Very long paper.
Okay.
This is a great idea to do nowadays, for example.
So we'll now proceed to the audience questions, and we have one from Luisa Lisboa. Elaine, it's for Elaine. Do you see room for the new designers working in the Brazil publishing market? I am a design student and I really like the editorial area, but I am discouraged by others to follow this path.
Well, it's difficult to say because I think that this changes a lot. For example, we have this kind of hecatombe, and it looked like the end of the path for all publishers like 2 years ago. And now we have many small bookshops and many small publishing houses starting again. So I think it changes, but for sure, the editorial market tends to be small because we see, well, I just don't want to start talking about the Brazilian situation nowadays because it's really we don't want to cry here, so I don't want to start like talking about this. Miguel said that it's a 3 million people country. You said, Miguel, that just bought 2,000 Bruno Monari's book. Yeah, it's like the Brazil, it's I don't know, 200 million country, and when we made the same book of Bruno Monari, it didn't sell 1,000. So we work in a very hard contest, and the education is really it's hard to believe, but it's really going down here in Brazil. It's not a priority for no one. So, but I think that in the other hand, Brazil is a very diverse country, and we have this kind of small groups and these bubbles of people, and sometimes I think that Ubu is an example because it's a small publishing house. It publishes books that are not, they sell like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 books, but we find a way of surviving. We have very low costs, and we have this system of having the books sold before printing. So I think it's part of being creative and of being a designer and being a creative, thinking about strategies of surviving. In Brazil, when you talk about books and when you talk about editorial, we are for sure talking about surviving. It's not a profitable market. It can be, actually it can be. We know that there are many publishers that really makes money here in Brazil. But when you talk about alternative and well-designed books, but this is, I don't know, it changes a lot. We were like 10 years ago, we were really had this the Brazilian government became the main buyer of books in the world, and this was a kind of a boom of children books because the Brazilian government really bought and really like if you were selected, you could sell like 100,000 books, and and then it finishes, and then something comes, and now this I think we are living in times of rebirth of interesting things. So I don't have a formula. I just think that if it's what you want to do, you need to be creative and to be brave and you need to be persistent and creative.
Okay, and I have another question from someone you know, Elaine, Ana Sabino. Do you remember?
Yes.
So Hannah Sabine is watching you. Hello, Anna. This is not exactly, this are her words. This is not exactly a question, but I particularly liked a part of each of the talks. So I would maybe ask the guests to speak a little bit more about this. So the first question is for Miguel, actually. For Miguel, about this curatorship of the catalog, do you see it as a kind of authorship?
Sorry, can you repeat the...
About the curatorship of the catalog, of Brua's catalog, do you see it as a kind of authorship? Like if you write...
Yes, because you are what you do, or that you are in the things that you do. So there's that personal input into the catalog. Someone said that you could, I don't know, I can't evaluate that, but we already got, someone commented that you could see that our catalog was made by a man. There's something, because of course I do it with Claudia and we do it as a partnership, but someone saw, I don't know, something more harsh and not as sweet as someone waits in a children's catalog, with some more defined purpose. I'm not saying that it couldn't be the opposite, but when people try to publish for kids, they tend to go for round texts, round proposals. When I say round, with no cutting edges that you can hurt sensitivities. And nowadays people are looking for explanation of emotions and mindfulnesses and all of these things that are going into literature and are not literature. So yes, there's always, you need to have this curatorship. I'm not sure if I'm answering that question, because these books are a reflection of who we are, and I cannot explain you who I am, because even I don't know who I am, or Claudia knows that. So it's a very, very personal selection of books. Like the books we have in our bookshops are the same kind of books we have in our catalog. It's the kind of book we need to have some pleasure in talking about that book, and that we are not ashamed of a book that we have ever published. And so it, like any book that we have in our catalog, we cannot choose our favorite one. They're all children of the same parents, so we don't have any favorite kids.
Okay, thank you, Miguel. For Elaine, from Ana Sabino, Elaine, about this relationship between technology and content that designers address. Are we designers, content engineers of some sort?
Yes, sure. I think it's a very nice way to say it, because I think that the whole of book designer is really making a connection between the content and the production. So it's very easy. It's not easy. It's very different to make an artist. Easy is really not a good word, but it's very different to make an artist book. Which is made by hand. So that you can have many, you can have folds, and you can have cuts, and you can have many experimental things, but it must be made one per one by hand. And when we are talking about industrial books, the whole of we have a lot of restrictions, and as we see, everything that you make different, it higher the cost a lot, because it's an industrial process and everything that's different costs a lot. So it's really hard to make something different in this field. And but sometimes I think in the majority, of course, when I show books, I show these books which are much more experimental. But actually, the day by day of designing books, it's making this like the same object. But I think it can be really innovative and experimental, being just a book without folds, without cuts, without different of signatures, different papers. It can be just a book, and even those be very innovative. And all my way of thinking about a book is this idea of translating a content. So sometimes, like I showed here, it's the structure of the book, like 3 parts, and 3 parts that are chronological. And sometimes it's I couldn't show everything, but there's many times, like in the Bartleby project that Anna knows very well. And there is something about it's something about translating the content in a much more poetic way. So sometimes it's just about but I think that she could define in a very interesting way. It's making this connection between the content and the industrial process.
Okay, and I think we don't have more questions from the audience. I think that's all. Well, that's all. Thank you, Miguel and Elaine, and to everyone watching us. It was a pleasure to chair this session. Before closing this session, I just want to remind everyone that the next session of these talks will take place next Wednesday, same place, online, and same time. And the guests will be Sophia Audrey and Cafe Matthews. I hope you can all come back to participate, and thank you very much for watching this. João, I don't know. Do you want to say some words, João or Sergio?
I'll say some words.
Sorry.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for sharing the session. I would like to thank Miguel and Elaine for accepting our invitation, for your talks, and congratulations on your amazing work. As Anna said, and Anna, thank you for sharing the session. Next session will be on the May 12th, next Wednesday. We'll have Sophia Audrey, a new media artist from Quebec, Canada, and Kath Matthews, a sound artist and composer from UK. You are all invited to attend the next session, and I thank you for attending this session.